So welcome for the very first time in Romania.
Yeah, my first trip.
I hope not the last one.
I hope not too. We'll see how it goes tonight.
If I get invited back or not. You have enough time.
It's a
till
beautiful
tonight.
hall. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. So I just got in yesterday, so I didn't really have a chance to see much of the city, but this is a beautiful part that we're in here around the Athenaeum.
So we were listening to you during your rehearsals, and the team was there. They were very curious. How is she singing? How is
Why
she
is she
looking?
singing?
And why is she singing now? She must talk with us.
Yeah.
So and they are very curious about your birthplace, about Alaska.
Alaska, yeah.
Yes, and they said...
Some degrees cooler than it is here.
Okay, how can you describe your country?
But my country, yeah, I really describe it as Alaska rather than United States. I am American, but I feel very, we always say in Alaska, Alaskan by choice, American by birth, Alaskan by choice. I'm Alaskan by birth and by choice. It's a very different atmosphere where when I was growing up, the airspace over Russia was closed. And so all of the artists coming from Europe, going on tour in the East, in the Orient, so to Japan or to Seoul or to Hong Kong, all of the flights stopped in Anchorage, and so artists would be coerced into doing a concert in Anchorage and one in Fairbanks. And so I got to see artists that if I had grown up in New York or in Chicago, San Francisco, I never would have been able to afford a ticket to go and see them. And maybe I wouldn't have been as interested because, you know, in Alaska, it was really an oasis that arrived. This artist came and brought this world to us. We were in the darkness in minus 40 degrees and just cold, dark, and there on the stage was this world where we just were invited in for that 2 hours or so. And it's, you know, it doesn't happen that often anymore, I think, maybe in today's life, because we have such easy access to music, to radio, CD, MP3s, television. There's always something, an input that we can get. In those days, we only had, I think, maybe 3 television channels, which is already something. Little bit of radio, a record player, but to have that kind of live performance, I'm so happy that I had that experience because it makes me think of what it might have been like, you know, when people would have a concert in a soirée in a room with a pianist like Liszt or a pianist like Chopin or Farinelli singing, you know, that it really was that kind of emotion of being there in that moment and existing for that moment. And then you just dreamt and thought about and dreamt about that moment again until the next artist came in town 3 months later. When I was sitting in the audience when I was a child, it was always what I wanted to do, was to be on stage and give that to people. And I have to say, being on stage, I never have the feeling that I'm giving something to someone. Because for me, it's always such a personal experience that I almost forget that there's an audience. It's for me. It really is for me. And
it's
everyone
an
is
egoistic point of view.
It's totally egoistic. It's completely, it's just because I love doing it, and I'm fortunate that I'm invited to do it. I mean, you know, but So, I mean, everyone is invited in, but it's my bubble, it's my world, I see things and I can live it, and I take a trip, I take a journey with these pieces, and I enjoy that so much. So it's a different perspective for me on stage than it was from the audience point of view. And it's beautiful, but I don't have that perception of bringing people. So I forget that happens, hopefully.
You are here with Europa Galante, with Fabio Biondi, and you, of course, like 3 cardinal points, and all of you under this Vivaldi's music.
Yeah.
So how it is to be surrounded with all these things?
But for me, playing with Fabio is always a really, it's a wonderful experience. He's so calm, so human. He doesn't push, he nudges you to do more, to do better, when we're singing, we can't always hear what we're doing in relationship to the other players. And so he'll say, listen to the line in the bass. There are areas that have changed completely for me with him, because I listened to the bass, I never heard that line and how my voice then intertwined with what the basses were doing. And then when I take that with other groups, then I still remember that, I still have that in my programming, and I love that. I love being instructed, illustrated, educated in what I'm doing, because as a singer, I always find that a little bit of stupidity is good, because you're asked always to do it a little bit differently if someone has an opinion. I think being too intelligent as a singer sometimes can be an issue. It can be difficult because you fight for something, and instead I feel like the strength of a singer is in the malleability, in the ability to morph, to change, to inhabit different spaces, different colors, and not be fixed on any one thing, and not fight for any one thing. Try and sit over here for a little bit, then sit over here, and go see what it looks like in the next room. Don't just stay in one mold. And so Fabio is somebody who helps me do that. He says, well, look over there. Do you see that color, in this music? And so that's really helpful. Europa Galante for me is like a family. I mean, I'm so happy every time I see them. There are different sizes of groups, depending on if we're doing Capuletti e Montecchi, or if we're doing Baroque music, or if we're doing Hasse, which is a larger orchestra. But the main staple people are always the same, and so it feels like you're coming home every time. And then being on stage with them, you're just surrounded by friends, and it's such a wonderful atmosphere. And you can turn around and you smile, and they smile back, and it's a good party.
Sarebbe un benedetto il sospiro d'amor, ma sempre dove piangere, sentirsi cuore affrangere, è un buono rigore che regna
Which are the very first steps with you and with Europa Galante? How did you meet with Fabio Biondi?
I was invited by him to do a recording of a Scarlatti piece in Palermo, and that was 15 years ago, I think. And then since then, he kept calling me to do different projects and things. So I was really happy that I don't know how he decided to ask me. It may be that I was doing more work at that time with Virgin EMI, and he also was doing projects with them. So maybe we were put together by Alain Lanceron or somebody like that in the company. That's possible.
Sempre dover piangere, sentirsi cuore affrangere, e un
Of course, I was reading a lot of things about you, your interviews, everything I could do until now. And I was very, very surprised that you have met Virginia Ziani and Nicola Rossi-Lemeni. What kind of imprint they put it on your voice and on your personality?
But very different, because they were very, very different people. I started studying with Miss Ziani in, I think it was 91, in the spring of in January of 91. And I had never seen someone like her before, so elegant, so beautiful, those eyes that she has, you know, that are, and then the way that she would demonstrate in masterclass, she would, you know, visidarte, you know, she would, and just, it was so beautiful. And Rossi-Lemeni, maestro, I was a really scared little kid when I was starting to sing, because I used to play violin, and violin you can see exactly, okay, the fingers need to be curved. Singing, how do you tell me, or how do I tell you how to sing?
You cannot see
I
this
can't go, okay, now put, yeah. You know, I mean, it's all inside, and it becomes kind of like a vision, and so I was completely lost. And Maestro Rossi-Lemeni to me...
How old you are then?
I was, let's see, what was that, 92, 181? I was 22.
Ah.
Yeah, 21 or 22. 21 or 22. And so Maestro Rossi-Lemeni then became like almost a grandfather to me. And I would go into the studio for my lesson. He said, Vivika, I was thinking about you. I was like, what? You should sing, you know. The aria of Rosina from Barbieri di Siviglia. Okay, I don't know what that is, but I'll go and look at it. I mean, I had no idea about opera at all.
Then you started?
That's when I started singing, yeah. That's when I started singing opera, because I had I knew symphony, I knew chamber.
What pushed you here in this area?
It was the only thing I could do, basically. Honestly, I had started college for genetics, for science, because my father was a professor of biochemistry. My best friends were all children of university science professors, biologists, volcanologists, geophysicists. Mm-hmm. That was the only world that I knew as a job. You know, you worked in the sciences, either with or without a university. So I decided I was going to go into genetics. And the first voice teacher that I had, she always told me that if you can do something else other than music, you should, because especially voice, you're based on two very, very small, delicate pieces of gristle, basically. And you never know. I mean, even if you have success, something could happen to you, but have success. I mean, you should have success, you know? You should be so lucky. So she said, you should do something else, and then if you still want to sing, then after you do another degree, then you can go into singing later on. And I wasn't able to do the degree. I just was so depressed without music, without dance, without music. And so my parents allowed me to transfer to Indiana University, which is where then I worked with Virginia Ziani and with Maestro Rossi-Lemeni. And I was scared to death, but fright is a good thing. Fear is a good thing. It makes you work really, really hard. If you're afraid of sinking, you learn how to swim, and you may not do it the way everybody else does, but somehow you keep your head above water, so it worked. it was thanks to Virginia Zeani that I became a mezzo, because I had been in Indiana University for 3 years and I graduated. But I was as a soprano always, because my first teacher had always said, you're a soprano. And I was singing Come Scoglio from Così fan tutte of Mozart. And really, I loved that aria at the beginning, the first page, you know, like, oh, Scoglio. Yeah, really good. And she stopped me, she said, my darling, but you want for to sing like this, you must for to be mezzo-soprano. And I was like, no, God forbid. I mean, because I finished my degree, I don't know, I can't change rep now, I'm done, I don't want to stay at the university. But then everything fell into place. I always liked singing the alto roles when I did choral work. I loved the sound of a viola. I never liked playing first violin. I mean, it killed me to go up on the E string. I just wanted to die. So, and then also the roles of mezzo-soprano. Mezzo-sopranos tend to be the people who are more active, and they get other people in trouble, and they don't necessarily kill other people, but they get them killed, kind of, you know. They create the problems, they create the difficulties, and that's always been kind of more my character, is to passive-aggressive.
What about Rosina and all the roles from Rossini's repertoire are doing while you are singing Baroque, for instance?
Well, I started my first 3 years of the career, I was singing only Rosina, Gli Italiani Lancieri, and Cenerentola. And then people started saying, okay, good, she does that, what else does she do? And they wanted me to do Cherubino and Mozart, but all of those Mozart roles that sat higher, well, even Dorabella, I mean, all of the Mozart mezzo-sopranos, but they really sat too high for me to be comfortable in the tessitura. It was very uncomfortable for me to stay in that second passaggio area. So I looked more towards Donizetti and Bellini, like Orsini in Lucrezia Borgia, I always loved. I sang Smetton in Anna Bolena, which is a great entry role for a young mezzo. And then, by some strange twist of fate, I got invited to do an audition for René Jacobs for an opera by Hasse. And I didn't know who Hasse was, and they sent me 2 of the arias. There were 8 arias in the role, and it was the leading role of that opera, and it was interesting that they invited me to audition for him. So I brought my Rossini, because I figured that was kind of what I did best. And then I prepared the other 2 arias for him, and that was one of 2 instances in my life where I was hired at an audition. I was hired at an audition. Otherwise, it was, oh yeah, okay, we'll keep you in mind kind of thing, because my repertoire has never really been, except for Rosina, it's never been the standard repertoire. And so for me, it's been great, because also the color of the voice I find is different from other people's. So you know if you ask for Vivika, then you know what you're getting, basically. It's a different kind of package in a way. And that's always been my strength in terms of marketing. But it's been what I love to do. I love doing things that are different. I love the possibility of doing it the way I want to do it. You know, instead of what I always found as a soprano really difficult was singing things like Mimi and any of those Puccini, even Mozart, because Mozart is so detailed what it's written on the page. You have to do a crescendo here, you have to decrescendo here, here it has to be piano, here it has to be. And I found it really constraining. And with Puccini also, there are all the recordings of all of these famous artists from, you know, all the way back from 1900, basically, something. And if you don't sing something like Maria Callas, like Renata Scotto, like Renata Tebaldi, like Mirella Freni, and it's like there's no space in people's ears for your interpretation, your sound. And in Baroque, there is only that, because we have treatises about what people sounded like, how they sang technically, but of course we have no idea the actual color, the sound of the voice, what that was. And so it's open, it's completely open, it's like jazz. So I mean, if you sing Mac the Knife or something like that, as long as you have something to say, or How High the Moon or something, as long as you have something to say, nobody's going to say, well, you know, you don't sound like Billie Holiday. They don't expect you to sound like Billie Holiday. They expect you to have, it's a cover. We basically make our lives doing covers. And the point of doing a cover is to have a new take on it. instead of sounding like Aerosmith or Adele.
When I was listening some arias from Vivaldi with you, almost sometimes I'm hearing small parts like Cecilia Bartoli. You know, this coloratura. Do you think that every kind of voice can have it, or if you want to have it, you have to work a lot?
I think both. I've talked also with doctors and with speech therapists also about, so technically there is the facet, it's like with some athletes do better at a 500-meter sprint, some people do better in a long marathon, you know, 15 kilometers, something like that, so they're better endurance rather than fast getting it done. There is that difference also in our makeup in terms of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle movement. How much accessibility you have to a fast twitch, kind of fast. However, what I find with singers mostly, I mean, it would be for me, it would be like saying, okay, that's Fabio, he can only play the violin slowly. You know? I mean, it doesn't exist. As an artist, you have to be able to sing slowly, fast, medium, soft, loud. I mean, obviously within your realm, you know, your possibilities physically. But what I find with singers is a lot of singers didn't have instrumental training when they were younger, and so they just began singing. Singing is something we can all do, we can all sing, and so they expect they should just be able to do it. And so they don't have, you know, when you play piano, half of your day is da 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 da. And singers think they just have to just warm up the voice and then you're good to go. But there's a certain amount of muscle dexterity. I mean, there's so much stuff going on. This one doctor I was talking with, he says, think about how complicated the relationship between the brain and the hands are. There are 50 times more neural connections between the brain and the vocal cords and the voice mechanism. So when we're singing, we're thinking about the tongue placement, we're thinking about the larynx height, lowering, the tilt of the cricothyroid, the pressure that we're putting in the larynx, the release of the false cords, I mean, and then the breath. There's a lot of stuff going on, and so all of those things, if one of those things is slightly off, or too much or too little, you can lose flexibility here very easily, or create a very tense kind of flexibility. I think that my flexibility came out of the violin training that I had, because Vivaldi writes almost exactly the same for the violin as he does for the voice. The Kaiser etudes that I used to play, I mean, it's all that kind of phrasing is what you can think. You have to, with the violin being a fretless instrument, you have to hear it before you play it. You have to know where it is, and that's the same with the voice. It's not just like with the piano, okay, I'm gonna push there and it's gonna be a 440C. And so the mental process is something that I find people who say, oh, I can't do coloratura, they haven't done the programming work, the mental work, in order, because if this is not sending the correct messages here, this can't do it. I mean, if I'm trying to play the piano and I haven't trained the muscles and my brain, first of all, my brain, what signals it needs to send to my hands, and then second of all, the muscles learning, okay, when the brain says this, this is what I need to do. But you have to do it slowly and methodically and build that confidence between the two objects. And then eventually muscle memory begins to take over some of the work itself. It says, okay, I know how to get there. I know where I'm going. And the brain can then start working like it's working a little marionette. It doesn't have to... But if you do coloratura like that, there's no time. It has to be marionette work by that time, by the time you do the coloratura.
Parla, lo sei fedele, credi, ma sei crudele. Morir mi nascerai morire, non più mancai valor, e la costa.
What is doing Vivika Genaux when she's not singing?
Usually a lot of studying. Learning a lot of notes, because a lot of times you only have one chance to sing things. So you're learning a lot of new music always. I'm fascinated now with technique, and so I go online and I read things about technique, old treatises about technique from the 1700s, people who are exploring differences in techniques today. There was an article also about what's happening with the modern singer today, not so much, well, some also in operatic singing, but also in pop singing, that so many people are having to be operated. Also in classical singing. A lot of students, even before they reach their 30s, they have to have an operation because of the way that they're being taught. And what are the opportunities today of learning this craft better than when I was studying? Because now we have so many instruments that we can actually look inside the body and see what is happening when you send different images and instructions from the brain. So that's fascinating to me. I love that. I teach whenever I have free time. I invite people to my house and I teach there.
So all the time connected with music?
Almost always, yeah. I have a hard time disconnecting. I feel guilty, and I feel guilty, but also the more I do, the more I'm able to do. And the less I do, the faster time goes by, and I don't do something. So I feel like I should make the best use of my time also, because I would like to teach someday, and I would like to be helpful and useful for people coming up in this field someday, if there still is a world where we're allowed to make this music, where there's a public and there are, foundations and organizations that give us a platform for performing this music.
One of your first arias you'll sing here at the Enescu Festival is Vorrei dirti il mio dolore. Everyone has a dolore, let us say. Which one it is yours?
In real life or in that
Yes,
aria?
in real life.
Oh my gosh, how much time do you have? My therapy session. Wow. Okay. Number one, I think I don't have as many as a lot of people do. I think so I don't have nostalgia or the desire to go back in my life and do something differently necessarily, or my parents are no longer living, and I'm really happy with the time that we did have together. So my mother traveled with me for the first 7 years of my career, and she loved that because she was Swiss-German descent. I mean, she was Swiss-German parents, and born in Mexico. She spoke 5 languages, and then she lived in Alaska, where she was a little bit more isolated. And of course, there was no opera company at that time in Fairbanks. So for her, one of my first jobs was with Richard Bonning, conducting La Cenerentola in Dallas Opera, and I was singing Tisbe. And I thought, well, can I bring my mom to the rehearsal, you think? And so we went, and I went up, Maestro, would it be okay if my mom sits in the rehearsal just like this? And he said, oh, sure, of course, come in, and it was just amazing. These people who you'd only seen their names on records, and such famous, incredible artists. And so that was amazing for me to be able to do for her, and I'm so happy that we had that time together and we had time to explore the cities. Sometimes we would take a vacation for 3 days after so that we could see actually where we had been. And then my father always said that whenever I was within 5,000 miles, he would come and see me. So for 5,000 miles from Alaska, that meant Minnesota and New York. He could get to New York and Pennsylvania. So he also came to see me very often, and we would get an apartment, and if I was doing opera, because I was there for a month. So I feel really good about the way that I set my priorities in terms of time. And I do believe in really existing in the moment as much as possible, which is difficult in this time where we have to multitask everything. We're supposed to be doing 8 things simultaneously. And I think with the singing, that's also one of the things that I like about the singing. You can't be doing 8 different things at one time. You can only be in that zone of the music and your brain and your contact and your emotions. That's it. That's enough. And I had a ballet teacher when I was growing up who was always really strict with us, and we hated her for it, but I learned so much from her looking back. She said, stop talking now. When you're in this room, and we're doing bar exercises, or we're doing stretching, we're doing the floor exercises, you belong to me. You are in this room, you are doing these exercises. You're not thinking about homework, you're not thinking about who you're supposed to call, you're not thinking about the fight you had with your friend or something. And it's such a liberation, because it's time where you cannot check your phone. You cannot go and write an email. You cannot respond to any of these outside messages that are always coming in on top of us. It's like being attacked always by now. And when you're practicing and when you're singing, it's now. It's this stasis moment, and that's such a nice place to be.
I want to propose you, for instance, you'll be in the Athenaeum's hall there, and you'll see Vivika Genaux on the stage. What do you think about her?
I know that every time I do a performance, or every time I do a rehearsal, every time I do something, I'm always looking for a way of doing it easier, more effectively, more artistically, of being freer with what my expression is. And so my times between stage appearances is dedicated to that, to making myself more flexible as I go along. And then being on stage is like an exam. It's like to see, okay, this worked, this didn't work, okay, this was fun, this was, next time we can tweak that a little bit more. When people meet me outside of the theater, I'm always of the impression that they're not impressed, that they're not happy with, that I'm not the same person off stage that I appear on stage. And so that's a very interesting conundrum for me, for my mental energy, because I'm not willing to do, it doesn't interest me being that person in that bubble when I'm off the stage. When I'm off the stage, I want to be able to talk, I want to be able to be me. And I can be a kid, and I can play, you know, and on stage I play, but it's a magic space, you know, it's temporal, it's a fixed time that you're there, so you can support that energy also, but it's a lot of energy being on stage, and so it's not something that I'm interested in doing off stage, and so that, it's kind of like having a dual personality in a way, which I enjoy very, very much. I like that.
Who is Vivika Genaux?
I'm a kid from Alaska. I'm a kid who grew up in Alaska, born and raised in Alaska. I was this barbarian kid from Alaska. My grandparents couldn't stand me because I was always uneducated in terms of the European structure. You know, children should be seen, not heard, that kind of thing. That was never me. I was always really loud. And yeah, trying to figure out who I am and who I want to be and who I'm perceived as being, and whether it's in my best interest to do something inside to change that perception from outside, but basically to make my life easier, because there are things that I do naturally that people then perceive in a way that is not helpful to me. So I can change my reaction or my action. I can't change their reaction if I don't change my action. So I'm interested in studying that. I think a lot, and that's why I say being a thinking singer is sometimes really a torture. One of the singers that I study with, Inga Kalna, I work with her sometimes, and she's so much fun because she says, you know, there are two kinds of singers. There's the intelligent singer, and they're always getting in trouble. They always know their words, they always know their notes, they know exactly what they're doing, but then they're always manipulating and doing things with the voice. And then there are the lazy bastards, she says. And the lazy bastards never know what they're singing. They never know their notes. They never know the words. They haven't the slightest idea what they're doing, but they sound glorious. So she said, you have to find your lazy bastard, she said. So I think about that, finding my lazy bastard sometimes, and finding, you know, of letting go of this type A personality. I'm a very type A personality, and I always want to control everything. And so I guess that's what I'm learning to do now, also studying with various teachers, There's one teacher also that I study with in Seville, Esperanza Melguizo Gomez, who says the voice should always be there and you're not involved. And I say, no, I want to be involved. I love being involved. I love modeling. I love playing. And I know that creates tension. But so now I'm generating the choice of being involved and not, you know, so when I really want to participate, I want to play in the mud. I do want to play in the mud and I want to get dirty. Or I can sit back and I was watching Fabio also playing the viola d'amore. And it's true, a lot of times in music, the less involved you are personally, the freer the music becomes. I mean, we always think, oh, this is such a passionate line and I have to, but there is a huge part of it that's just letting it go, letting it happen, let the music happen. It's written that way, it's going to achieve a certain effect. You don't have to do something. So there is a very good side in that, learning how to just step back and let it do it. Let the music do it, rather than you have to participate all the time.